Okay, what about the Scottish investigation now? And the
Well,
visit of...
you only have to read the statements of the two detectives, the Scottish detectives who went out there, to realise that they were given the runaround. They must have felt like they were being made mugs of, or that certainly it reads that way. They went to find out about these timers, MST13 timers, only to be told that none were recovered, and that the timers that were recovered were still in the hands of the Togolese authorities, and that they look nothing like MST13s. So that it does leave a huge hole in the investigation that was never filled. The provenance of the MST13 timers that were supposedly recovered in 1986 is still up in the air. It's never been established where they came from.
Yeah, what you just said makes me think of two questions. So, as you just said, the Togolese authority, the president, the chief of police, the policeman who led the investigation, none of them recognized the timer. All of them said, we have never seen this. But what they do show, the Scottish policemen, McAteer and Peter Haven, is two flash timers.
Yes.
Where do the flash timers come from? I mean, they were not on the picture and on the videos, nor on the James Casey list. We never...
Again, another peculiarity.
And I said two questions. I think I forget the second one right now, but it will come back. Yes. Why? Maybe we should discuss this in the conclusion, but as you say, the origin of this timer was never explained, not even to this day. Why was it not something that the defense used at the trial?
I don't know. I can't answer for that. I'm not aware that the question was ever put to the defense. I'm sure there's an answer. I guess they might say that it was academic because there was no doubt that PT35B appeared to be from an MST13 timer, and there was no doubt that MST13 timers were made by Mebo and supplied to Libya. So the origin of the timer that was used years earlier to make the match, whilst there are some interesting anomalies surrounding it, they are, one could argue, not anything that could affect that central plank of the Crown case, which was that there was a match between the fragment and the MST13s.
Okay, we may come back on this issue and perhaps the point of view of the Commission, the CCRC, because in the chapter 25 they argue, of course, that if some people out there had some MST13 timer, people not from Libya, not linked to Libya, that of course that raised some serious question. Togo timer, K1, any opinion on this device that was recovered?
Well,
this one of the French one, by the way. The French one, of course, we know very little about it.
Yeah, we know very little about the French one, but K1, one thing that's struck me when I looked at this the first time round was that the photos supposedly taken in 1986 show the circuit board, the exterior of the circuit board, not the side that has the circuitry on it, but the side that was facing outwards looks quite damaged. It looks like it's been scratched quite badly. But when you see the subsequent photos that were taken at Rade, it looks a lot cleaner. Now, the apparent scratching in 1986 might have been dirt that was removed, but it didn't look, it did make you think that it might be a different item.
Yeah. Just to let you know, Um, a few people, including myself, are a little bit puzzled by one thing. So this circuit board obviously comes from the second batch because it is lacquered on both sides.
Yes.
So that's one of those boards that Mibo received late in the year, in November, I believe.
Mm.
Which means that by that time, Lumpert had built quite a few MST13 timers. And
Yeah.
still, when you look at the details of it, it looked pretty much like a very, very early design. Not nearly as well built as the control sample, for instance, that Lumpert will provide to the police.
Yes, but the control sample was made some years later.
Yeah.
I mean, can we really be confident that it was
identical?
Well, no. My question is, can we really be confident that the build of K1 indicates that it was an early model, despite the fact that it had one of the later model type circuit boards in it?
Well, there was at least one clear statement from, I have it in front of me, just under the picture, you may be able to see it. You see the picture, photo 4, DP124?
Yes.
So you remember in early 91, Lumpert is shown that picture, and what he says, this is a pre-series timer because the condenser has been soldered diagonally, and for any reason. And then he had, on the other hand, it is obviously lacquer on both sides. So he seemed to be confused because he cannot reconcile those two facts. But he's not pushed.
But you know, if this anomaly is dependent really on the quality of Lumpert's memory, and he's talking in 91 about events 5 years earlier, and can we really be sure that his memory is accurate? I'm not sure we can, so I don't necessarily read too much into that apparent anomaly.
I agree. French timer, we know very, very little about it. I don't know if you have a comment.
No, there was very little paperwork disclosed about it. I know there was a report by the French forensic scientist Calisti.
Yeah.
There were other documents that are referred to in police statements that we never had disclosed to us when we were working on the case.
Just to be sure, I think you told me that before, but just to be sure, is it true that we don't know when this timer was given from the Togolese authorities to the French?
I can't recall. I know that the French gave it to the Scottish police in 1999, but I can't recall the chronology or whether we know the chronology for how that for when that timer got into the possession of the French.
Yeah, I have never seen any paperwork documenting these timers being given either to the US or to the French. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but I have never seen it. Okay, I think this is not a very serious thing, but there was a book written by one of the person at Stratford, and in one chapter he speak about Kaz's version of the event, and it's totally silly. He speak of a fight between the US and the Libyan, and Kaze stealing the K1. You read anything into that?
Maybe just poor reporting. I don't know. I would take, because it's a second-hand account, I would take it with caution.
Yes, you should know that Stratford was, of course, getting very good information from someone at the FBI, and thanks to WikiLeaks, we have learned that someone was actually James Casey.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So, we spoke already about the list of James Casey with item Y being added. So I think there is nothing more here. There is, however, something interesting. Casey states that access to prisoners had not been granted.
Access to
prisoners. So the rebels who attempted the coup on on September 23rd.
Yeah.
The chief of police and the president of Togo suggested to the US team that they could interview the prisoners. And Chero just say that they simply thought that it was not necessary. They declined because they didn't see what they could learn. But of course, if they were so interested into the origin of K1, into the origin of the MST13 timer, surely it would have been a good idea to ask those people.
Yes.
And Kaze came up with a completely different explanation. He said access to the rebels has not been granted. And there he contradicts Chero completely.
Yeah.
Any opinion?
Well, I don't, you know, I mean, this, I have no opinion on that other than to say that yet another contradiction in the official account or accounts and evidence. You do wonder if Chero is correct and they didn't see it as necessary to speak to the prisoners, why that was. I mean, as you point out, it would have enabled them to find out more about the timer and the other weapons.
Okay. And to finish this part, if you have it in front of you, what I call the Togolese puzzle, and that's the statement of Peter Ravent and McAteer, who pretty much left Togo without any answer to their question. Anything to say about that?
Well, not really. It, you know, just another. It just leaves more question marks over the case.
And of course, the police reports, as you told me, were never disclosed to the defense. So the police reports regarding those two events, and I say this because according to Peter Ravent, I believe, when he went to the US Embassy, they did show him some picture of the MST13 timer.
Yes, well, I guess they may have been copies of Chero's pictures.
So that was strange that, I mean, those three Togolese people, president, chief of police, and the investigator of those events said they had never seen this timer, but they do have pictures of them.
Yeah.
And the final story, the final question before we finish this part is the allegation of Richard Chero.
Yes.
About the connection between the timer and the CIA.
Yes.
What do you?
Well, I mean, if that story is true, and I mean, if a company in Florida was making MST13 timers for the CIA, then that, of course, is absolutely sensational. It's not been verified, but when it comes from sources such as Devereaux and Chero, then you have to take notice. These are not, I think, cranks.
No. Chero definitely seems to be a good person, and in his presentation at the Waco, Texas hearing, he said, we do not need to take side. The only side that matters is truth.
Yes, well, that's encouraging. And the fact that he should even be discussing this.
One of the things that you did investigate is the attempt by Chuck Byers to contact the local bee investigator.
Yes.
What came from that?
Well, I asked some questions back in 2001 of the Crown Office, and they were fairly evasive. I can't remember the precise answer I received, but it was along the lines that a conversation had been had. There wasn't a formal interview, and it was left at that. Rather inadequate, you would have thought, if what Byers was saying was true, then that would have blown the whole case open. But he at least, what he was saying should at least have been investigated, and it appears that it wasn't. I may be wrong, but there's nothing to indicate that it was investigated. Rather that it was looked at in a very cursory way.
Okay, so I suggest that we end this part here, and then just a few questions for the conclusion. 1 second.
Okay.